consigo ver que está mesmo com a luz aqui mesmo a dar nos olhos.
Vamos aqui, mas é passear.
Vens aqui, faz um sinal, está bem?
E o gajo deve estar a lembrar disso.
Põe no peru.
Na altura tinhas mais cabelo.
Vocês estáis prontos?
Está inteiro, se calhar.
Não sei como é que tem os sapatos todos.
Olha, ó Mia, pergunta-lhe. É o rápido ou o lento? Médio.
Para trás.
Se não chovesse tanto, meu amor, se a noite não tivesse vindo assim, se o céu não estivesse desta cor e houvesse menos gente ao pé de mim, se o céu não estivesse desta cor e houvesse menos gente ao pé de mim, se eu pudesse saber o que eu não sei, se eu pudesse dizer o que eu não digo, se não sentisse falta do que dei, se não quisesse agora estar contigo, se não sentisse falta do que dei, se não quisesse agora estar contigo, não fosse eu não saber se estás contente, não fosse eu não saber onde é que moras, não fosse a minha casa estar diferente, se não fosse já serem estas horas, não fosse a minha casa estar diferente, se não fosse já serem estas horas. Eu te diria que é ilusão minha, que a noite parece ter fim, é que eu estou muito feliz aqui sozinha, não fosse tu não estares ao pé de mim, é que eu estou muito feliz aqui sozinha, não fosse tu não estares ao pé de mim. Muito obrigada. Thank you so much. Muito obrigada. Thank you. Olá a todos, a todas. Hello everyone. Welcome to Porto. Welcome to Portugal for some of you. Thank you so much. Muito obrigada. And welcome to Fado 2, our national song. Bem-vindos e bem-vindas ao Fado. Vesti a blusa nova e estreiei o meu chale para contigo ir ao baile e dançar juntinho a ti. E até para tu me achares mais airosa e vistosa, pus no cabelo uma rosa e chinelinha no pé. Mas mal entraste, ouvi que falaste com Rosa Maria, aquela que namoraste na lua da moraria. Para não te dar o prazer de mostrar todo o meu azedume, tirei a Sheila, calei-me e afastei-me sem um queixume. Fingi não ver e fui dançar com o rapaz que me andava a fazer o namoro a valer para comigo casar. Julgavas ter com quem brincar, mas vê bem como tu te iludiste quando no baile me viste nos braços do outro a bailar. Saí depois do baile, era já madrugada, mas desta vez abraçava já o trinão a ti. E sei que tu e a Rosa Maria se riram quando na rua assistiram ao abraço que eu lhe dei. Como é costume, vem-me no azedume do vosso embaraço, que estruturava o ciúme de eu ir com outro pelo braço. E vi depois zangarem-se os dois, porque tu lhe disseste que estavas desiludido e arrependido do que fizeste. Fingi não ver e fui dançar com o rapaz que me andava a fazer o namoro a valer para comigo casar. Julgavas ter com quem brincar, mas vê bem como tu te iludiste quando no baile me viste nos braços de um outro a bailar. Julgavas ter com quem brincar, mas vê bem como tu te iludiste quando no baile me viste nos braços do outro a bailar. Muito obrigada. Thank you so much. Obrigada.
Quanto tempo foi ser? Então pode ser
Tu querias-me convencer que me bastava viver dos recados que mandavas. Tu querias-me convencer que me bastava viver dos recados que mandavas. Só recados recebia, não te falava nem via, nem sabia onde é que andavas. Só recados recebia, não te falava nem via, nem sabia onde é que andavas. As noites que não dormi à espera já não de ti, mas de um recado qualquer. As noites que não dormi à espera já não de ti, mas de um recado qualquer. Pedi então que parasses, que recados não mandasses, para que eu pudesse esquecer. Pedi então que parasses, que recados não mandasses, para que eu pudesse esquecer. Para mal dos meus pecados, tu mandavas mais recados, indiferente ao que eu pedia. Para perdoava os meus pecados, tu mandavas mais recados, indiferente ao que eu pedia. E até hoje, sem parar, continuas a mandar para que eu sofra o que sofria. E até hoje, sem parar, continuas a mandar para que eu sofra o que sofria. Mas não te prendas comigo, eu já nem sequer lhes ligo, tantos anos já passados. Mas não te prendas comigo, eu já nem sequer lhes ligo, tantos anos já passados. E agora um bom motivo é que o homem com quem vivo acha graça aos teus recados. E agora um bom motivo é que o homem com quem vivo acha graça aos teus recados. Muito obrigada. Thank you so much. Muito obrigada. Obrigada. Para terminar, eu vou cantar convosco um fado tradicional que fala sobre não existir um fado antigo e um fado novo, existir apenas fado. E a música também serve para nós rompermos algumas preconceições que nós temos, e o fado não poderia ser deixar de ser um lugar onde podemos fazer isso. So now I'm gonna sing to you and with you a traditional fado, and talks about that we don't have like a old fado and a new fado, we just have fado. And this is like a path that we need to break some preconceptions also in music, also in fado too. So my message to you now is please have fun in Porto, enjoy the meeting, and I hope to see you again. Once again, muito obrigada. Thank you so much. Obrigada. Existe um e um só fado que assenta na tradição, e para ser bem cantado só faz falta um coração. E para ser bem cantado só faz falta um coração. Não é por pôr uma tuba, acrescentar bateria, que uma geração derruba o que outrora se fazia. Que uma geração derruba o que outrora se fazia. Não quero a eternidade, nem os momentos de glória. Quero deixar na saudade um pouco da minha história. Quero deixar na saudade um pouco da minha história. At Portuguese Guitar, Mário Henriques. At classical guitar, Pedro Martins. Once again, thank you so much. Muito obrigada a todos e a todas. Obrigada. Não existe fado novo como não há fado antigo. Ele é o grito que um povo carrega sempre consigo. Ele é o grito que um povo carrega sempre consigo.
Pardon?
Would they have lights up there?
Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the SA 16th Porto Conference. Welcome to Portugal. Welcome to the Superboc Arena, to Palácio de Cristal. Here with me for this opening ceremony, I have Teresa Sordé, the conference co-chair from the Autonomous University of Barcelona. I have also Paulo Peixoto, the chair of the local organizing committee of the conference, the vice rector of the University of Porto, Professor José Castro Lopes, and the mayor of the city council, which is a real honor for us to receive, Rui Moreira. Thank you very much. Thank you. Between the ESA's decision to hold the ESA conference in Porto in 2021 and today, we have faced difficult times in Europe and the world. By then, the pandemic fears were still ongoing, even though we were overcoming them collectively through science-provided solutions. Several wars hit different latitudes, and the climate of uncertainty progressively intensified. The SA has proved to be a vibrant association facing all the challenges from the last 3 years by organizing the biggest in-person conference ever, including around 4,000 registered participants. The conference, this is a success for the European Sociological Association. Thank you very much. So the conference is structured by almost 900 sessions, where research and thought-provoking debates will keep us certainly very busy for 4 days. We need to discuss, we need to bring our contribution to think about the tensions. As you know, the topic of this conference, tension, trust and transformation, was an invitation to think about tensions, how to build trust, and also think about scenarios of transformation. This is one of the tasks, the main tasks we wanted to propose to the conference participants. So tackling these tensions and also thinking about these tensions, connecting them with the growing social inequalities we are assisting nowadays. Also thinking about the spread of authoritarian ideas and regimes, the political instrumentalization of social and cultural differences. All these phenomena serve as a basis for hate against minority groups as well. So all these tensions have been escalating into the forms of conflicts between individuals and collective agents as well. As I mentioned, we had and we see horrendous wars costing the lives of civilians and innocent people. So from all these tensions we can testify how old forms of social inequality continue as new forms of social inequality emerge. And the sociology and sociologists have a lot to do and to say to change and to overcome these inequalities. So only if we produce collective knowledge on societal tensions can we foresee processes of social transformation. Through sociological imagination, robust theoretical approaches and methodological tools, sociologists contribute to transforming societies and improving the lives of individuals. At this conference, sociologists and other social scientists will discuss their work's impact on societies. Rebuilding trust configures a bridge we need to establish between tackling tension and imagining transformation, as I said. We know how several political, economic, and social dynamics threaten trust between social actors and institutions. Among these, the lack of trust in science and in scientists and also policymakers is problematic, is becoming increasingly problematic. Sociological research and international scientific conferences, such as the ESA Porto Conference, are key to addressing all these challenges and creating opportunities for transformation. As you know, the program is composed of 3 plenary sessions. One of these sessions will be after this opening ceremony. We have 19 semi-plenary sessions and 12 midday special sessions, organized by the ESA past presidents, the executive committee, members of the councils of research networks and national associations, the local organizing committee, and collective projects such as the International Sociological Committee for the Digital Era, where DSA has been working alongside with International Sociological Association, the Association of French-speaking Sociologists, and the Arab Council for the Social Sciences. Sociology and social sciences build solutions based on solid knowledge that can design transformative scenarios and new dynamics for social life. So these 3 plenary sessions will give overarching insights into the conference main topic. The SA Executive Committee wanted to bring a diverse group of highly skilled scholars and promote debate with conference delegates at different academic career stages. In line with the work done by this team, we desire the SA conference to be an intergenerational space for collective thinking and joint networking. We have the semi-plenary one as well, building open science together, transformative concepts and practices, in line with the SA's Executive Committee priority to make a big step towards open access to knowledge by partnering with the MIT Press to turn its 2 journals utterly accessible to any citizen as from January 2025. This discussion of open science requires researchers and scholars to be involved because access to science is a matter of social justice. And pursuing open access is the only way to overcome inequalities in terms of accessing research data, but also in what concerns opportunities for publication to all researchers, regardless of where they are based, their gender, ethnicity, age, etc. To reinforce the impact of sociological research, we shall build together creative pathways and debate creative ideas and practices to build upon science, new science models and more open science models. You have other semi-plenary sessions, the rest 18 semi-plenary sessions addressing topics such as the transformative role of culture and education, the challenges of digital capitalism, migrant and refugee children, youth mobility, environmental governance and energy transition, harassment in institutions, critical sexuality and gender studies, public sociology, far right-wing populism, European citizenship and identity, academic freedom, homelessness, teaching social theory, among others. I will not, of course, speak about all the topics because the program is enormous, as you know. The midday special sessions also will be an opportunity to debate on topics of interest for sociology, including how the European Alliance for Social Sciences and Humanities, of which the ESA is also an active member, has been working on reshaping the science and technology narrative to include research done in the different fields of social sciences and humanities, namely at the level of the European Union strategic funding. Creative ideas and bridges between research projects, as you know, often emerge from informal moments of encountering. So the social and cultural program of this conference is comprised of exciting opportunities to learn more about research experiences and the importance of collective efforts to make sociology and the essay stronger. This year, we have the privilege of celebrating the ESA 30th anniversary as well. So the Executive Committee and the LOC prepared a special celebration of our anniversary right after this opening session and the plenary one by organizing a sociological speed dating with the ESA past presidents. I think this will be very exciting. The dinner and party will take place at the historic venue of Alfândega, the city's customs house, built in the 19th century and declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. And the closing will occur at Casa da Música, a building designed by Rem Koolhaas and built for the Porto European Capital of Culture. The beautiful Suji room, where we will finish this meeting, will offer the perfect scenario for the last words of this event, as well as to launch new ideas for future EXA activities. Organizing this conference with the different teams has been an exciting journey. I will finish in 1 minute. I just want to thank everyone involved in this organization. It was an enormous task. All the members, of course, of the ESA Executive Committee for bringing constant dedication and collegiality to this project. My special thanks also to the members of the Conference Committee, Gary Pollock, Teresa Sordet, Conference Co-Chairs, Kaja Gadowska, Tiziana Nazio, Maria Carmela Agodi, Bernadette Brereton. Thanks also to the colleagues directing the pre-conference summer school, finished yesterday, Cristina Santos, Kreshimir Jajar, and Lucia Maria Fratzea. On behalf of the SA, also special thanks to the Portuguese Sociological Association and the LOC chair, Paulo Peixoto, for coordinating the 6 Portuguese University Consortium, quite complex, leading the organization locally. The event counted on the precious support from the local support team as well and the ESA office, in the persons of Roger van der Bos, ESA Executive Secretary, Sandra Pinheiro, Conference Assistant, and Manuel Garcia Ruiz, Communications Manager. Big thanks also to the conference interns, Afonso Castro, Tomás Neiri, Carolina Ribeiro, and of course the Portuguese Sociological Association Executive Secretary, Isabel Rebelo. They were really crucial to make this possible. Well, the ESA conference will certainly be a place for an inspiring debate and also for exciting encounters, especially now that we haven't had the opportunity to meet for almost 5 years now in person, because the last conference was in-person conference was in Manchester. Then we had the Barcelona one. Unfortunately, we had to do it online. So I'm pretty sure that together we will contribute to making sociology more present, more powerful than ever in this European horizon. May your ideas flourish and develop in Porto. I wish you a wonderful conference. So this night I'm going to be the master of ceremonies as well. And now I give the floor to Paulo Peixoto, the conference LOC chair.
Thank you very much. Dear Rui Moreira, Mayor of the City Council, dear Professor José Castro Lopes, Vice-Rector of the University of Porto, on behalf of the Rector, to whom I extend my warm regards. Dear Teresa Sordet, it's nice to be here with you, the conference co-chair. Dear President Lígia Ferro, dear colleague, dear colleagues of the local organizing committee, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and fellow enthusiasts. So welcome to the 16th ASA conference, and I have the distinct honor, or perhaps the overwhelming responsibility, of serving as the chair of the local organizing committee. And if you are wondering what that it means, well, as you know, I'm the person to thank if everything goes smoothly, and person to blame if it doesn't. But let's keep our fingers crossed for the former, shall we? Today, on the day when, for the second time in the 40 years of the Portuguese Sociological Association, we organized 15 years later an ASA conference in Portugal. Today, I was saying, marks the beginning of something truly special for us. We are here in Porto, not just to celebrate the start of an event, but to embrace the spirit of collaboration, innovation, and a shared passion for sociology that brought all of us here together. Whether you are here to showcase your talents, share your knowledge, or simply to soak in the experience, each one of you plays a vital role in making this event a success. Now, as the chair of the local organizing committee, I can assure you that we have been working tirelessly, like caffeine-full, late-night pizza ordering tirelessly, to make sure everything is perfect for you. We have put together a team that is as diverse as it is, I should emphasize it, dedicated. We have faced countless challenges along the way, of course, from logistical nightmares to last-minute hiccups. But if there's one thing that I've learned, it's that a great team can turn an obstacle into an opportunity, or at least a funny story to tell later. And speaking of stories, let me share a quick one with you. During one of our last planning meetings, someone in the team suggested we set up an emergency plan for every possible and impossible scenarios. I thought they were joking. It was a little bit exaggerated. But by the end of the meeting, we had a contingency plan for everything. So rest assured, we are ready for anything. Obviously, we kindly ask you that neither test nor challenge us in this regard. But let's not forget why we are really here. This event, it isn't just about logistics or the presentations. It's about people. It's about sociology. It's about the connections you will make, the ideas you will exchange, and the inspiration you will take home with you. Every conversation, every handshake adds to the mosaic of this incredible event. So, as we kick off these few days of learning, of networking, and maybe a little bit of partying, of course, I want to encourage you to step out of your comfort zones, attend that session that seems a bit out of your field, strike up a conversation with someone you have never met, and don't be afraid to share your crazy ideas, of course, because who knows, that crazy idea might just be the spark that ignites the next big sociological thing. And finally, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here, as your presence is what makes this event possible. Whether you travel from across the globe or just down the street, as I did, you have brought with you a wealth of knowledge that we want to be part of it, we want to share it. Your experience, your enthusiasm that we are all eager to tap into. So let's make the most of this time together. Let's create, let's collaborate, and above all, let's have some fun. After all, in the grand scheme of things, it's the laughter, I would say, the memories and the shared experiences that we will all take with us long after the closing ceremony. Thank you, and let's get this show on the road. Thank you very much.
Now I will pass the floor to Teresa Sordet.
Dear Mayor, dear Vice Rector, President of ESA, President of the Portuguese Sociological Association and Chair of the LOC, colleagues, as the co-chair of the conference together with Gary Pollock, it is an honor to welcome you today to the 16th Conference of the European Sociological Association. Behind today's event lies 3 years of intense work by many dedicated individuals, whom I will not mention by name, as our president has already extended our gratitude to all of them. However, she might not have mentioned someone who has been crucial, who is herself. Here, I would like to acknowledge Ligia's Ferro own dedication and outstanding commitment during her tenure to the association, but also specifically to this conference. Thank you, Ligia. This ESA conference will be a place to tackle tensions, to build trust, and to discuss alternatives for social transformations. We are convinced that these days will demonstrate the importance of meetings and dialogic exchanges as a way of progressing our shared sociological endeavor. The core of the conference, as ever, are the many fora where more than 4,000 sociologists, from PhD students to renowned professors, will be present and discuss their work on equal terms with our broader community. Tensions, trust, and transformations. In these troubled times, social science owns its place firmly alongside other disciplines, being instrumental in addressing fundamental challenges, such as those captured by the Sustainable Development Goals. These inequalities need to be studied at various levels with diverse methodologies and in terms of their impacts. Their inherent flexibility of sociological theory and methods means that there is likely to be responsive debates with competing perspectives and a mutual respect for alternative or even opposing positions. During the coming days, we hope to find stimulating and challenging sessions where tensions, as Burawoy will encourage us tonight, address real-world problems, for instance, or learning from the battles won by our grandmothers, guided by Anália Torres. We will also reflect on how to reinforce trust by exploring disability justice or analyzing contemporary politics of belonging, and how it can lead to dehumanizing the other. But mostly, we will be sharing debates around how to promote transformations in fields like open science, LGBT, climate change, refugee rights, impacts of social theory, children's well-being, and along, etc. These discussions will touch on many important debates and persisting debates that we will be sharing. For those engaged with funded research, evaluations, and publications, the need to demonstrate social impact has been a growing requirement over the years. For some, this has been a challenge, but it is undoubtedly a historical opportunity for all of us to reorient our sociological research and to maximize its transformational potential. The desire to make a difference, to have an impact, to transform society for the better is central for the future of sociology. As Fletcher says, the type of sociology that citizens like, endorse, and are requesting sociologists to promote. We hope that we have a productive and enjoyable conference, that you also take time to enjoy the company of our colleagues and the extraordinary city of Porto. Thank you.
Now I give the floor to the Vice Rector of the University of Porto, Professor José Castro Lopes.
Thank you very much. Dear Mayor of the City of Porto, Dr. Rui Moreira, dear President of the European Sociological Association, Professor Ligia Ferro, dear co-chairs of the conference, Professor Teresa Sordé and Gary Pollock somewhere in the audience. We cannot see from here. Dear President of the Portuguese Sociological Association and Chair of the Local Organizing Committee, Professor Paulo Peixoto, dear speakers, dear lecturers, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor and a privilege to welcome you all to our city and to our university on behalf of the Rector of the University of Porto, and to express how proud and honored we feel hosting this 16th Conference of the European Sociological Association, which gathers a remarkable and large group of renowned national and international researchers dedicated to the study of some of the most crucial issues of our time that, as we know, is rapidly changing, deeply influenced by new challenges, new tensions, new anxieties, and even new truths. The central role played by the Institute of Sociology of the University of Porto in organizing and holding this conference is a clear demonstration that the University of Porto has a major role in social sciences, and particularly in sociology, but not only because of the quality of the training that it provides to our students, but also thanks to the momentum and the excellence of the research produced by the Institute of Sociology. In fact, since it was created in 1989, the Institute of Sociology of our Faculty of Humanities and Arts has established a fruitful dialogue with the community and with a large number of institutions, promoting debate and scientific innovation in social sciences. Moreover, the Institute has been part of the National Network of Research Units since 2002 and has been developing an intense activity involving on a daily basis around 100 researchers and PhD students. I therefore would like to pay a particular tribute to the coordinator of the Institute, Professor João Teixeira Lopes, which is also somewhere in the audience, for the outstanding work he has been doing and for his boldness in hosting or contributing to host such an important event for the European and international sociology. Let me also very warmly thank all of those who have tirelessly worked to make this ESA conference a reality, saluting the President of Portuguese Sociological Association and Chair of the Local Organizing Committee, Professor Paulo Peixoto. I also would like to greet and congratulate the President of the European Sociological Association, Professor Lígia Ferro, who is also a prominent researcher at the University of Porto. Your leadership must be appreciated and valued for the great work you have done and for the significant success achieved by ESA during your term. Last but not least, I would like to greet the more than 4,000 registered participants at the conference and all the researchers whose scientific work will certainly contribute to the success of this event. In fields as far apart as labor relations, culture, economics, education, environment, health, or emotions, all irrevocable parts of the human and social experience, sociology and social research is becoming increasingly essential in highlighting the dynamics of the world's change and transformation. Thus, this conference is an excellent opportunity to discuss the future of this discipline and to deepen its ability to shape our future together. On behalf of the University of Porto, I hope the meeting will lead to effective progress in social sciences, ensuring a better knowledge of our reality and consequently building a better future and a stronger community settled on solid humanistic ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I'll give the floor to Rui Moreira, the Mayor of the City Council of Porto.
Good evening, everyone. Let me greet the President of the European Sociological Association, the Vice Rector of the University of Porto, the Local Organizing Committee Chair, the Conference Co-Chair, all the participants, ladies and gentlemen. It's with great pleasure and interest that I'm taking part in the opening of this conference. I would like to thank you for the invitation and extend my greetings to the organizers of the conference, represented here by Professor Lígia Ferro. The Portuguese Sociological Association, the Sociology Institute of the University of Porto, and other research centers are to be congratulated for organizing such an important scientific conference. I would also like to congratulate the European Sociological Association, which is celebrating 30 years of its activity. The conference that is now starting should be praised for the relevance of the topics to be analyzed, the quality of the speakers, and the opportunities it provides for knowledge sharing, academic cooperation, and of course scientific debate. Science does not provide immediate answers to the complex challenges faced by society, but debating ideas, problematizing reality, questioning the concepts that science fosters are crucial for discovering new paths for our collective future. In other words, for realizing our transformative power over society. It is very gratifying for the city of Porto and its academic community to host one of the largest sociology forums in Europe. This conference is being held in Porto for the first time and only the second time in Portugal. It is therefore a unique opportunity to participate in the reflection and debate on the social phenomena of our time. Humanity is living through a historical moment marked by vulnerability, uncertainty, and complexity. We might say that we are sailing through uncharted waters because of the unprecedented threats that we are facing. In this context, the knowledge that comes from social and human sciences and the skills developed through their teaching acquire increasing significance. However, hyper-specialization in science and the omnipresence of technology in contemporary societies tends to devalue the role of the social and human sciences. But perhaps never before have the critical thinking, methodical reflection, and empirical problematization resulting from the social and human sciences been as important as they are today. Those who think that understanding the post-COVID world can be achieved without the historical, social, cultural, and also political analysis provided by the social and human sciences are deeply mistaken. The complex, uncertain, and rapid evolution of contemporary societies reinforces the role of social scientists and the importance of research focused on human relationships. Tension, trust, and transformation. The theme of this conference is particularly apt at identifying the challenges of contemporary times, which require the intervention of sociology. The study of social phenomena is crucial for understanding what is happening in the world, and to point our paths, clues, or signs to guide us through this winding road ahead. It is therefore important to provide social researchers with the conditions needed to decode the present time, so that ultimately they can provide us with the tools to build a more sustainable world, not only from an environmental perspective, but also from geopolitical, social, and economic viewpoints. The municipality of Porto supports the organization of meetings with the characteristics and objectives of this conference. We are aware that science, in all areas without exception, progresses through the sharing of knowledge and the debate of ideas among researchers. I would like, therefore, to commend the choice of our city to host the conference. As mayor, I'm very pleased that our city is hosting an academic meeting of this scale, importance, and prominence. The city of Porto is fortunate to have within its academic and scientific community several institutions of international excellence with research innovation capacity. I would like to highlight the University of Porto, which is the largest producer of science in our country. Moreover, the innovation ecosystem in our city has proven to be, at the national level, one of the most dynamic and capable of creating value. Therefore, it makes sense to host these events in Porto. Furthermore, the municipality has been striving to promote the city as a hub for reflection, discussion, and cooperation amongst various academic and scientific institutions. We are aware that these exchanges allow enriching knowledge and skills through contact with other academic, scientific, and professional realities. We hope this conference will be a success, that the speakers will have a wonderful stay in our city. We are grateful for the opportunity to contribute to the reflection and debate that will take place over the coming days. I would also like to take the opportunity to welcome the speakers at the conference and the 4,000 researchers, students, and professionals who are participating in the event. We are really very pleased to welcome you to Porto. Porto is a city known for its hospitality and charm. We welcome all of us who visit us, leaving a hint of longing even before their departure. Let me finish by wishing you, therefore, a very successful conference. You are here today in this very special building. It looks a little bit like a spaceship. I know that you will end the conference in Casa da Música. It looks a little bit like a meteor. I really hope that you will enjoy this different city that we are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is working? Yes. Okay. So now I call Ana Maria Santos to the stage to read the message of the President of the Portuguese Republic to this conference. Thank you, Ana Maria.
Hello, everyone. The Portuguese and the European Sociological Associations would like to thank His Excellency, the President of the Portuguese Republic, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, for his kind message for the opening session of this Congress, which I will now convey. The timely convergence of three words, tension, trust, and transformation, places Portugal and the city of Porto at the forefront of the European debate on the historic moment we are navigating, the global challenges we face, and the crisis we foresee. It is therefore with great pleasure that I extend my greetings to the consortium of research centers and universities from the north and center regions of Portugal, led by the Portuguese Sociological Association, for their exemplary organization of this event. I also warmly welcome all attendees, guests, speakers, and researchers, with a special acknowledgement to Dr. Lísia Ferro, the current president of the European Sociological Association. Having moved beyond the global upheaval caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, which necessitated the 15th Congress to be held entirely online, the city of Porto is now honored to host the 16th edition, marking a significant reunion for this distinguished scientific community. As Europe's foremost sociological gathering, taking place during a pivotal moment that challenges the research agenda of the social sciences, the need for rigorous reflection on emerging phenomena and their contextualization within the prevailing political, economic, and social conditions has never been more pressing. Furthermore, considering the diverse array of topics and debates scheduled for the coming days, I wish to underscore the increasing significance of sociology as a field of inquiry. Its broad scope is invaluable in analyzing our world, from the global to the local and individual levels, providing critical insights that can help shape our collective future. Finally, I extend my sincere appreciation to the Portuguese Sociological Association, which for more than 3 decades has established itself as an independent representative of a vibrant community of thousands of professionals. Their work spans not only academia, education, and research, but also extends into the realms of business, local governance, central public administration, non-governmental organizations, and cultural and political spheres. I wish you a highly productive and enriching Congress, and I trust that its outcomes will contribute to a thoughtful and sustained reflection on the historic juncture we face and the challenges we must collectively address as a community, as Europeans, and therefore also as Portuguese.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria Santos. Well, I finished this opening ceremony by thank everyone here, the present in this table, and I now call the next protagonists of the next scene of this conference, Professor Michael Burawoy and Professor Anália Torres. Have a nice conference.
just sit on there?
Do you prefer to sit here?
I got to read some. I got to read some of it.
I think he cannot be seated.
Oh, yeah, okay, okay. Do you prefer?
So we follow the order, okay? Start by introducing you, and then I will give the floor to you, and then the floor to you, and then we close because it's impossible to bring the microphone upstairs.
Right. You will say that, right?
Yes, yes. Okay, let's go for the second moment of today, the plenary 2 on the topic of tension. And for today, the conference committee decided to bring Michael Burawoy and Anália Torres. Thank you very much for accepting our invitations. I will present them briefly and then I will give them the floor. I'm very sorry, but because we have approximately 4,000 people in this room, it's not possible to open debate for this session. It would be really technically very complicated to do it. But of course, you can approach the keynote speakers outside during the welcome cocktail and during the conference, because they will stay with us, so you can approach them with your questions and entail dialogue with them. First, we have today, it's our pleasure to receive Michael Burawoy from the University of California, Berkeley, USA. Michael Burawoy has been a participant observer of industrial workplaces in 4 countries, Zambia, United States, Hungary, and Russia. His projects attempt to illuminate, in turn, the contradictions of post-colonialism, the organization of consent to advanced capitalism, the peculiar forms of class consciousness and work organization under state socialism, and finally, the dilemmas of the Soviet transition to capitalism. No longer able to work in factories, he turned to the study of his own workplace, the university, to consider the way sociology itself is produced and then disseminated to diverse publics. His advocacy of public sociology has been developing a labor theory of pedagogy. Of late, with his advocacy of public sociology has generated much heat, I'm very sorry, in many a cold place. Of late, with teaching assistants, he has been developing a labor theory of pedagogy. Now it's correct. He has been president of the American Sociological Association, president of the International Sociological Association, founding editor of the magazine Global Dialogue, and co-chair and secretary of the Berkeley Faculty Association. Thank you very much. And Anália Torres, from the University of Lisbon, Portugal, also ESA past president. It's our pleasure to receive Anália Torres here. A PhD in sociology, full professor and coordinator of the Department of Sociology in the Higher Institute of Social and Political Sciences, University of Lisbon. She has founded and directs the Interdisciplinary Center for Gender Studies, the only center for gender studies in Portugal, graded as excellent by international panels of the Foundation for Science and Technology. She was president of the European Sociological Association from 2009 to 2011, of the Portuguese Sociological Association 2002 to 2006, and has been a member of the European Research Council's evaluation panels. Expert on gender and family issues, she created doctoral, master's and postgraduate courses on sociology and on these fields, and coordinated several research projects in national and international research networks. Author, co-author and editor of more than 20 books and of 80 book chapters and articles in 82 national and international scientific journals in several languages. She was awarded the Medal of Scientific Merit in 2023. So after presentation, I will now give the floor to Michael Burawoy. I don't know if you prefer to stand or to speak from here.
Let's see how it goes. I'll start by sitting.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Good, wonderful. Thank you, Alicia, for your kind and
generous introduction and for inviting me here. It's already quite clear to me that you and your team have done an amazing job assembling all of us here in Porto. 4,000 sociologists in one place. Now but the chair of the local organizing committee said that you are ready for anything.
Yes.
Well, we will see. Well, this is indeed quite a venue. I have never given a talk in such a venue in my whole life. I feel after the wonderful music we had that I should be singing my talk to you. But I'm no singer, barely a sociologist. So let me first say how honored I am to be addressing you here today, especially to be speaking alongside Anália Torres. Some 20 years ago, it was Anália who introduced me to the wonders of Portuguese sociology, an engaged sociology that sprung from the 1974 revolution. And I don't know anywhere else in the world where we would have heard such erudite speeches from your mayor and from your president, both sympathetic to sociology. I sometimes worry when people are sympathetic to sociology. Yeah. When I received the invitation from Ligia and the two chairs of the conference committee, Teresa Sorde and Gary Pollock, I knew this was an offer I couldn't refuse. After all, it was to be held in Porto, the most beautiful city in the world, populated by exciting sociologists such as Ligia Ferro herself and my good friend, João Lopes. I'm sorry if I massacre Portuguese. And of course, his students. And the two great Bourdieusians, José Pinto and Virgilio Pereira, and no doubt many others who I do not know. When I received this invitation, I had no idea how I would address the theme of the conference, tension, trust, and transformation. But I had a year and a half. All I knew was that I would take this rare opportunity, or I would try to take this rare opportunity to address something of vital importance through a sociological lens. Last November, the supreme organizer of this splendid conference, Sandra Pinheiro, asked me for a title. Prompted by the war in Gaza, I decided to pose the question whether there is an exit from settler colonialism. And I proposed to try to answer this question by taking a South African lens to the study of Palestine-Israel. At that time, I did not anticipate that the conflict would still be ongoing a year later. After all, previous wars ended quickly due to Israel's military superiority. However, this time was different. The urban terrain, the resilience of Hamas, the changing balance of forces in the region, and the new technologies of warfare created new challenges for the Israeli Defense Force. And moreover, it was pursuing a more ambitious goal, the freeing of hostages and the elimination of Hamas. I could never have imagined a war conducted with such inhumane brutality, nor that it would give rise to tidal waves of demonstrations and encampments across the globe. As we know, in the United States, many universities descended into a silent and sometimes not so silent civil war. In my talk today, I want to compare the struggle against the Israeli Jewish state with the struggle against the South African apartheid state. This is not a political talk. but a sociological talk about politics. This is not to say that social science can insulate itself from politics. Research is unavoidably based on political premises, and its results have political implications. This is as true of Max Weber as it is of Durkheim, Marx, and Du Bois, of Bourdieu and Habermas, of feminism and critical race theory. As it happens, on October the 7th, 2023, I was in Johannesburg, in a Johannesburg Airbnb, on one of my regular visits to South Africa, listening with horror to the early reports of the murderous Palestinian invasion from Gaza. During the ensuing weeks and months, I wondered how it was possible for the eruption of violence and counter-violence to have led to a negotiated outcome in South Africa, rather than a catastrophic escalation of conflict between, as we saw, have seen and continues to see, between Palestinians and the Israeli state. How is it that it did not happen in South Africa? The 1980s, after all, saw the eruption of African civil society under the umbrella of the United Democratic Front, UDF, and then the Mass Democratic Movement, MDM, supported by the Union Federation and the African National Congress in Exile, prompting the police state to declare war on the protests with assassinations and torture, militarized occupations of townships, bombings and subversion of neighboring countries, especially newly independent Angola and Mozambique. Hundreds were killed and thousands detained in 1985 alone. It looked like Armageddon had arrived. Yet 10 years later, South Africa had withdrawn from the brink and negotiated a path to majority rule. The negotiations were so different from those of the Oslo Accords between Israel and Palestinians, between PLO and the Israeli state, the Oslo Accords of 1993 and 1995, which had only led to the deepening of hostilities culminating today in the war in Gaza. Why the differences between these two countries and with what implications? There are many answers to this question, but I want to embrace the differences under the conceptual umbrella of settler colonialism, distinguishing between two different settler colonialisms, and this is the major point of my talk, one largely driven by labor exploitation and the other largely driven by land expropriation. But first, what should we mean by settler colonialism? It involves the subjugation of an indigenous population to form an outpost of a metropolitan nation. The invaders become settlers when they are there to stay. In the case of South Africa, it began with the Dutch East India Company in the middle of the 17th century, and in modern Palestine, it began with the immigration of European Jews at the end of the 19th century. In both cases, the settlers had to fight wars against the indigenous population for territorial expansion before setting up racially exclusive states. It is important to note that settlers were often fleeing their own persecution. The Jews were fleeing pogroms of the 19th and early 20th century, and then the Holocaust. Afrikaners had lost contact with their ancestors, but, like the Jews in Palestine, had to face British imperialism. Coincidentally, 1948 was an epic year for both settler populations, and indeed for the colonized. For the Jewish settlers, it was a culminating war of liberation against the British mandate and a less celebrated war against the Palestinians with the establishment of the State of Israel. For the Afrikaners, 1948 marked the election of the Nationalist Party in a franchise confined to whites, giving rise to the apartheid regime. In both cases, settler nationalism turned into a repressive order targeting the native population, which coexisted with a liberal democracy for the settlers themselves. I've briefly made a prima facie case for settler colonialism in both countries, but this is often vehemently denied by the settlers themselves. They did not see themselves as perpetrators, but as victims, not as colonizers, but as colonized. Afrikaners saw themselves as a chosen people, destined to rule over South Africa, supported by the Dutch Reformed Church with its Calvinist antecedents, and by the powerful secret society, the Broederbond, working with the Nationalist Party as a major architect of the apartheid order. Zionism also claims that Jews are not conquering an alien territory, but returning to their own land, as defined by biblical scriptures. The land of Palestine was waiting for the Jews to return. As they used to say, a land without people for a people without land. Zionism also denies that the settlement was an extension of a Western metropolis, although the World Zionist Organization, acting through the Jewish National Fund, purchased land from Palestinian absentee landowners. And it turned out that that was more effective than to be linked to a single Western metropolis. According to Zionism, this was not colonialism because Palestine belonged to the Jews, a chosen people who had suffered genocide. Zionism thereby overlooks the 500,000 Palestinians who lived there before the Jews began to migrate at the end of the 19th century. It ignores the anti-colonial movement of the Palestinians, which erupted in 1936-37 in a great rebellion against the British mandate rule for supporting the immigration of European Jews, especially those, of course, fleeing the Holocaust. Above all, Zionism has obscured the painful reality of the massive land dispossession and population displacement of 1948-49, known to the Palestinians as Nakba, but to the Zionists as a war of liberation. And during this period, Jewish land ownership moved from 7% to 77% of Palestine, while the expulsion of 750,000 Palestinians meant that the Jewish population increased from 26% to 80%. This was the 2-year period, including the war between the Jewish population, the British who were leaving, and most importantly, the Palestinians. What can sociology make of this denial of settler colonialism? We too are a chosen people. But we have a different belief system. We believe in evidence-based research, as I've been hearing today. And behind the research, we are interested in causal explanations that lead us to historical analysis and the search for alternatives. What exists, and I'm quoting Antonio Gramsci, what exists is not natural and inevitable, but the product of particular forces. We are, in fact, believers in the very title, theme of this conference: tensions, trust, and transformations. Another of our tasks is to critically examine the belief systems of others, belief systems which, when ardently held, I call ideology. Our role is not to simply refute ideologies, which is often a fruitless task, but to understand how they arose, what experience they speak to, why they appear to be immovable, so resilient, so persistent, and yet, notice, they also change. In other words, we have to take ideology very seriously. We're of the dominant or of the dominated. One of our favored techniques is comparative studies. No one likes to be compared, however, to someone else, especially if it upturns our view of ourselves. Even sociologists may resist comparisons that challenge conventional understandings. I recall the horror with which my colleagues greeted dissertation proposals in the 1980s and 90s that, for example, compared working class militancy in Brazil and South Africa, a book by Gay Seidman, or ethnic cleansing by Serbia and Israel, a book by Jim Rohn, or settler domination in southern Rhodesia and Northern Ireland, Ron Weitzer, or the systems of migrant labor in South Africa and California, Marcel Perret, or the relative historical success of ANC and PLO, a book written by Mona Yunus, upon whom I have drawn many ideas in this talk. My colleagues exclaimed, "You can't compare oranges and apples." But that is what sociology is all about. Performing the magical trick of turning apples and oranges into pineapples. My pineapple today is that prickly concept, settler colonialism. Over the 20 years, settler colonialism has in fact become a field unto itself. The concept has been developed by both Palestinians and Israeli sociologists, especially after the 1967 war and the creation of the occupied territories, Gaza, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. As Arish Sabakuri has noted, Israeli sociologists tend to look at settler colonialism, when they do so, from the standpoint of the colonizers, while Palestinian sociologists take the standpoint of the colonized, or, as in the case of her new magisterial book, Colonizing Palestine, Sabakuri herself takes the standpoint of Palestinians, but as seen through the archives of the Jewish kibbutzim. I think the first Palestinian sociologist or Palestinian social scientist to look at the archives from that standpoint. Perhaps the most influential theorist of settler colonialism is Patrick Wolfe. For him, settler colonialism is inherently eliminatory of the native population, whether through genocide, expulsion, assimilation, or other means. This may fit the US, it may fit Australia and Canada, it may fit Israel, or Palestine, Israel, but not South Africa, which cannot afford to eliminate the native, as it has been crucially dependent on cheap black labor. Wolfe's exclusive focus on territoriality and land appropriation misses the centrality of labor exploitation in South Africa and other settler colonies. It is interesting, as a footnote, to note that settler colonialism is not a familiar concept in South Africa, or has not been until recently, not as familiar as the concept of internal colonialism. But I will stick with settler colonialism for the purposes of this talk by stretching its meaning beyond the one intended to by Wolfe. My thesis is that Palestine-Israel moves from settler colonialism driven by labor exploitation to a settler colonialism driven by land expropriation, whereas South Africa moves in the opposite direction from the centrality of land expropriation to labor exploitation. My claim is that we are witnessing the consequences today of these divergent settler colonialisms. Well, I've been reading for 10 minutes, so I think I should use my PowerPoint now. All right. Now the question is, can I use it? What am I supposed to do here? Oh, look at that. That's magic. Whoa. Great. All right. Well, there you have the title. And what I want to do is to give you a quick summary in the 10, perhaps 12 minutes, and then wrap up in another 10, 12 minutes. Yes, and you better hold me to it. All right, this is the trickiest part, which I haven't sort of written out. But I thought I just know too much about this, so it will have to be what I remember. All right, let's go. All right, this is working. Okay. What I want to do is to actually compare South Africa and Palestine from the standpoint of the dynamics of settler colonialism. There is no way you can make this comparison without a bit of history. In South Africa, the settlers were from the Dutch, or promoted by the Dutch East India Company in the middle of the 17th century. And they landed in Cape Town, or what is now Cape Town, and slowly but surely pushed the native population out. And over time, They were successful through the Dutch East India Company in developing commerce, needing more land, and pushing the natives further and further away, often through military, warlike engagement. And the Brits came later, in the early 19th century, and they started pushing the Afrikaners out. But the crucial switch came with the discovery of diamonds and gold further north in the Transvaal at the end of the 19th century, the last 2 decades. And that required a whole different vision of colonialism, one that will be based on the exploitation of cheap labor for the mining industry. It is true that actually, of course, the Afrikaners themselves were reliant on cheap labor, but it was not that that was driving settler colonialism but land expropriation were the basis of the wars. Come the mining industry, we then have a whole new form of colonialism based on the creation of African reserves, pushing actually Africans into smaller and smaller areas of land until the 1913 famous Land Act, which pushed officially Africans into 7% of the landed area of South Africa, but with a view to what? With a view to generating cheap labor for both the farmers and for the mining industry. And that continued. And that's a story I will tell more in a minute. But it's that switch that I think is really crucial to the understanding of the history of South Africa. And a sort of reverse switch, and this is perhaps a little bit more controversial in the case of Palestine, Israel. Of course, in the case of the Jewish migration, and they were immigrants in the first Aliyah, as the Israelis call it, from 1982 to 1900. Indeed, the issue was land. Immigrants needed land, and this already was being sponsored by the World Zionist Organization that was purchasing land from Palestinian absentee landowners. But what is interesting, as Gershon Shafir shows in his very important book written in the 1980s, that actually one of the most interesting features of the after 1900 was the development of a solution to the split labor market in Israel-Palestine. Well, it wasn't Israel then, it was definitively Palestine. That here we have immigrants from Europe, not really very practiced in the art of agriculture, and it was natural for those who were able to own the land to employ Palestinians, cheap labor, who were also quite practiced at agriculture. And what a story develops that out of this is the one solution to the split labor market that protected the material interests of the immigrants was to actually develop a labor exclusive policy and to push the Palestinians out of employment and to reserve the employment in agriculture, reserve it for the immigrants. We get the phenomenon of the kibbutzim. And the kibbutzim became the foundation of what became the Israeli state. The kibbutzim developed the Histadrut organization, labor organization, that was the foundation of employment. In fact, it became the biggest employment outside government in Palestine, Israel. It organized banks. It developed massive agriculture through the kibbutzim system. Developed essence, the welfare state, health insurance, that basically Histadrut became the Israeli state. It was a labor state. And indeed, the beginnings of post-48, post-1948, when Israel was created, the labor component was very key to its ideology and its practice. But, as I will show and I've already intimated, the drive for land was absolutely crucial. It was crucial in the war between Palestinians and Israel, 1948, and in that period, the Jews managed to appropriate, as I said earlier, 77% of the land of Palestine, way more than that which was established by the UN decision on partition. Yeah, I'll talk more about that in a minute. In fact, that will be the next line, but what I want to suggest here, there was a focus on labor exclusiveness, the development of a labor movement that was founded on this, what you might call a cooperative commonwealth. Yeah, but that shifts and to a process of land expropriation, which I might say a process that had already been developing ever since 1900, the whole of the previous part of the 20th century. Yes, all right. So what I want to do is I want to suggest that we look at the dynamics of settler colonialism after 1948 through the national lens and then a global lens. And that generates, yes, a 2x2 table, which we know is part and parcel of what we mean by being chosen people. We have our sacred 2x2 table. Okay, all right. Let me go through this quickly. Labor exploitation after 1948, and before to some extent, in South Africa. What is the significance of labor exploitation? It is that capital depends upon labor. That's a fascinating idea, that exploitation requires capital to depend upon labor as well as labor dependent upon capital. Our friend Marx always talked about the way that labor was dependent upon capital, but capital depends upon labor. And actually, capitalism is one of those peculiar modes of production, distinctive, perhaps unique, in that it can actually generate concessions to labor, to the exploited, without touching the essential, that is the pursuit of profit. Whereas we see in the case Palestine-Israel of land expropriation, we see the elimination of the indigenous, not the dependence on the indigenous, but the elimination of the indigenous. As has been said, the Palestinians over time had little, with certain periods of exception, had little to offer the Israeli economy. So moving back to the story of labor exploitation, the struggles of labor exploitation against labor exploitation in South Africa, but elsewhere too, of course, stayaways, strikes, boycotts, whereas the struggles around land involved wars. 1956, 1967, 1973, 1982, and today. Territorial wars. One of the features of the apartheid regime was the so-called Bantustan, which was seen in part to be the externalization of conflict from the urban areas, but most essentially became a source of cheap labor power, subsidies for cheap labor. But subsistence existence in the Bantustan meant that you didn't have to pay workers so much in the urban areas. And the analogy has been made for the occupied territories of the West Bank and Gaza. But actually what is crucial there, I believe, was the conquest of land. Though indeed, for periods, actually, the occupied territories did deliver cheap labor. In fact, they delivered cheap labor after 1967 when Israel took over the occupied territories that had been, on the one hand, the West Bank was administered by Jordan and Gaza was administered by Egypt. The 1967 war led to Israel occupying both of those areas, as well as East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights. But the point I want to make is that in the final analysis, it was the conquest of land that was crucial rather than the generation of cheap labor. And politically, what was happening in South Africa as a result of the various forms of protest was the banning of the African National Congress and actually the Pan-African Congress too. And they went into 1961, they went into exile. What precipitated this was a protest, the Sharpeville protest, the Sharpeville killings in which I think it was 60 protesters were killed. What is very noticeable about the protest and the repression in South Africa is that it never reaches the proportions of what we see in Israel-Palestine. The protesters themselves are targeted, not a random killing of civilians. Anyway, the banning of the Sharpeville led to the banning of the ANC. ANC goes underground and moves into exile. We have a parallel move. The PLO was created in 1964, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and they're basically in exile from the beginning. They're chased from one place to another. First, they settle in Jordan. The Israelis come and attack them there. They move to Lebanon. In 1982, the Israeli state attacks them there, threatening, actually, has a siege of Beirut. So the Palestinian PLO moves to Tunis. The PLO is always in exile. All right, that's stage one. Stage two of these national dynamics is what I call revolt and repression. In both countries, in both contexts, we have these spontaneous uprisings. In 1973, the Durban strikes, and then in 1976, the Soweto uprising. These were both unexpected, and ANC is in exile or in prison, and these spontaneous uprisings give rise to, eventually in the 1980s, to a massive, almost like a civil war in South Africa, the UDF and the MDM. And we get similar spontaneous uprisings in Israel-Palestine. The first Intifada from 1985 to 1987 to 1995, and then the second Intifada is 2000 to 2005. The first Intifada is what generates Oslo, what generates the Oslo Accords, a negotiation between the representatives of the PLO and the Israeli state, but orchestrated by the United States, who presents itself as an honest broker, but in fact is behind the Israelis from the beginning to the end. What happens is that Oslo turns out to develop a particular form of government in the occupied territories. The Palestinian Authority is essentially a security apparatus for the Israeli state, namely to actually repress resistance from the Palestinians. And the Palestinians become more and more resentful of the way their so-called Palestinian Authority is behaving, and this leads to the second Intifada. And the second Intifada is much more violent and is much more targeted at the Israeli population within the green boundary, within Israel itself. And as a result of that, the Israeli state insulates the occupied territories. Until that time, from 1967 to around 2000, Palestinians in the occupied territories had been cheap labor. They had flowed into Israel and had been employed in construction work and similar jobs, the service sector. But they never represented more than 10% of the labor force in Israel, and therefore didn't have the leverage that, of course, the African laboring classes had. So, following this resistance movement was a very intensive repression in both countries. In 1980s in South Africa, we get the declaration of the state of emergency, the occupation, military occupation of townships, assassinations, tortures. Thousands of people are detained and many hundreds are killed as a result of the repression. But at the same time, the interests of capital very important, the interest in cheap labor very important, and so there are reforms. There is the creation of urban insiders that have more, can stabilize their presence in the urban areas, and the development of registered trade unions. Repression plus reform. Whereas, as I was saying, in the case of Palestine, Israel, we have repression plus ghettoization. As we would say now of Gaza, was an open-air prison. So basically, Gaza was an open-air prison, and what was happening in the West Bank? Well, we know the expansion of the settler community and the drawing of boundaries, very strict boundaries that regulated the movement of Palestinians in and out of the West Bank. And one other thing is very noticeable and interesting is the development of the nationalist project in both these countries. When the Afrikaners assumed power in 1948, there's already the beginning of a split within Afrikanerdom between what used to be called the Verkrumter and the Verluchte. The Verkrumter were the reactionary or more conservative wing of the Afrikaner population and representing the maintenance of the apartheid order. And in a very strict segregationist sense. Whereas the Verluchte, who were becoming more and more powerful, were interested in the development of capitalism, their own capitalism. And so they were more liberal and more interested in the reforms. The opposite seems to be happening in Israel-Palestine. Their Zionism has actually been supplanted, as we have seen, as the progression of settler colonialism takes place. Zionism becomes ever more committed to the land expropriation project. And as we can see today, the more right-wing political leadership, starting actually in 1977 with the Likud party. But today, what we see is that the government is increasingly dominated by people from other parts, not the European Ashkenazi Jews, but increasingly the Mizrahi Jews, the Arab Jews from Syria, from Iraq, from North Africa, and for other countries. They, from the beginning, were always seen, stigmatized by the Ashkenazi Jews. Now they're taking over and assumed a much more populist perspective on the future and the strategies of the Israeli state. They're the ones that, from the beginning, were driving the expansion of the settler community in the West Bank. So what we get in South Africa is a negotiated solution, one that is of a non-racial character. And it is the pressure of a working class in the context of a developing capitalist economy that pushes for evermore that is the foundation of the movement towards concessions. It is the way in which the African working class was able to organize not just its structural power, but its associated power, its power of building solidarity across from the industry into the community, that actually led to the concessions that became the negotiated solution, which would be a talk into itself. But all I want to stress here is that the negotiated solution had its roots in the character of labor exploitation and development of capitalism in South Africa. Whereas in the case of Palestine-Israel, what we have seen is a sort of a continuation of the strategy of land expropriation, which leads to a zero-sum conflict and the deepening of racism. Let me quickly move on to the global chain. You can't understand the results of what's going on within these two countries without looking at their global connections. What is interesting about the ANC that during the 1980s, when it is actually fighting a liberation war, that they become to be seen as freedom fighters. The United States is a prototype of this, of course. In 1985, 1986 actually, there was the passage of the anti-apartheid sanctions. And these were political and economic sanctions. What had happened is the ANC from one day to the next had moved from being terrorists to freedom fighters. Now, of course, the PLO has not managed to rid itself of the image of a terrorist organization. And we will see what happens with the increased support for the Palestinians around the world. But what we also note that in the regional context, the ANC with the independence of Angola and Mozambique and Zambia, there is a support for the ANC project, whereas what we see in the context, a very complicated context within which Israel-Palestine sits in the Middle East, there is ambiguous support for the resistance movement of the Palestinians, of the PLO. A lot of talk, but not much action. One also notes that the collapse of the USSR is a crucial factor in the ascendancy of the ANC within South Africa, that the Afrikaner regime was always terrified that the ANC was too inclined to get support from the USSR, too inclined to be communist, which they usually denied. But anyway, the collapse of the USSR wiped that out of condition. And actually, Gorbachev actually said to the ANC, he said, look, we can support you, morally, politically, but we are not prepared to fight a war in South Africa. So in a sense, you might say that with the refusal of the USSR to actually supply sufficient arms to prosecute a civil war, that obviously discouraged the ANC from actually pursuing its liberation struggles in a violent manner. And similarly, in the Palestine-Israel case, the collapse of the USSR was a factor that led to the weakening of the support for the PLO. It's actually interesting that the Soviet Union in the beginning was actually supportive of Israel because, of course, Israel, the Israeli state, was very much a labor-invested state. But anyway, it shifted over time, particularly after '67, to a support of the PLO. Okay, and finally, the apartheid state. Well, the apartheid state, it's in decline in a sense because it is looking at it globally, it is an anomaly in decolonizing Africa. It is the final country to experience decolonization. And Afrikanerdom, the Afrikaner nationalism seemed anachronistic. In the context of the Israeli state, well, the Israeli state from the beginning was constituted itself as an outpost of Western modernity, surrounded by Arab countries, infidels. And that, of course, made it very appealing to the United States. And when, in 1967, the Israelis showed that they could actually win a war very quickly and effectively, then the United States showed that it was indeed inclined to support the Israelis against the Palestinians. And of course, Israel was a very important political ally in the Middle East. All right, that was a perhaps jumbled vision showing you that there are real divergences here. What I want to do now is just read my conclusion, which is 10 minutes, but I've 5. No, I can't do that. Yes. We're very late. All right. All right. All right. So what I was going to say was, first of all, to show that the apartheid concept was not an adequate concept to look at the differences between Palestine, Israel, and South Africa. Yeah. That got rid of that page. And what I've tried to argue here is that the struggle over land expropriation is a zero-sum relationship that allows no compromise, whereas the struggle over labor exploitation is a non-zero sum that does allow for concessions, for the possibility of a negotiated solution. The point is that with nothing to lose, Palestinians stage and continue to stage a disruption of Israeli rule. Yes, okay. The divergence between land expropriation and labor exploitation was also reflected in the changing composition of the ruling classes. And I've talked here about the way that Afrikanerdom changed in a more liberal direction, and how the parties, the ruling party, the ruling classes in Israel, Palestine, have moved in a more conservative direction. Yes, and then let me move on to talk about the international anti-apartheid movement, which I haven't mentioned so far, played a very significant role in the reversal of British and US policies. Strikingly, the spread of the anti-Zionist movement over the last year, powerful though it has been, has made little or no dent either in the British or the US government. Quite the opposite. The US continues its military, political, and ideological support for Israel to the point of inviting Prime Minister Netanyahu to address both houses of Congress, thereby underlining US's unequivocal support. We must ask why the US remains the linchpin of Israel's survival. What lies at the foundation of this foundational relationship? Well, I was going to tell you something about Stephen Luke's 3 faces of power. But let me first say, the first face of power would have been, as I would have talked about it, would be the lavish spending and ubiquitous tentacles that the Israeli lobby dominates United States and beyond. They have fingers in the US state in Congress and in spectacular ways show themselves capable of removing top administrators or elite universities if they don't rein in anti-Zionist protest. The Israeli lobby has induced a widespread McCarthyite fear among critics of Israel, fearing of being accused of anti-Semitism. The Israeli lobby is joined by Zionists in the US. They include evangelical Christians as well as wealthy and powerful Jews. And then there is the second face of power, which is the idea of the strategic significance of Israel, geopolitical significance and economic significance of the Middle East and the role that Israel will play and can play and has played in that area. And the third face of power is the ideological face underlying the first 2 faces, refers to the US's ambivalent attachment to the Jewish people. I say ambivalent because the US supported the formation of Israel, preferring a new home for Jewish refugees rather than taking in a flood of themselves taking in a flood of refugees. From the beginning, Israel represented itself not only as a new land for the persecuted, but an outpost of Western modernity in a sea of infidels, ready to go to war against hostile neighbors. However, when victims become perpetrators, unresponsive to international appeals for ceasefire, unresponsive to the court of public opinion, then their moral privileges can be withdrawn. Then their ideology is perhaps punctured. The future, therefore, looks gloomy. But we are sociologists, the chosen people, looking for the chink of light, So let us consider three outcomes, and I'm going to, three outcomes of settler colonialism. The first is Patrick Wolf's elimination of the native. As I've been at pains to argue, this has been the strategy of the Israeli state, whether through extermination, expulsion, removal, or partial assimilation. Unlike Australia, the United States, Canada, native resistance has been irrepressible. Palestinians lose and therefore have nothing to lose and therefore fight with more and more determination. They will not be eliminated. The second outcome of settler colonialism is the elimination of the settler, such as was the case in Algeria and Northern Ireland. But have Israeli Jews somewhere to go? To be sure, the European Ashkenazi Jews are already making the most of their connections to the West, especially in the US. But Mizrahi Jews, the Ethiopian Jews, the Russian Jews have nowhere to go. Their attempt at escalation domination is what we are witnessing now in pursuit of territorial exclusivity is leading them down the path of collective destruction. The third outcome is a negotiated solution, a recognition of Palestinian rights of return to participate as equals within a shared political framework from the river to the sea, equality of opportunity to access resources for all those living within the territory of Palestine, Israel. This, of course, goes against the principle of land-based settler colonialism, but the point of my historical analysis is to show how settler colonialism is not a single type and it can change over time. Who in 1984 could have imagined a rapprochement between black and white South Africa? Who imagined that the US would switch its views of the ANC, or for that matter, withdraw defeated from Vietnam? If the US were to pull the plug on Israel, the balance of forces within it would shift dramatically. Negotiations might then have a different outcome than the Oslo Accords that were dead before they began. One can imagine the exodus of European Jews, while Arab Jews might rediscover their Arab roots. Yeah. But a note of caution is in order here. The negotiated solution in South Africa, miraculous though it was, failed to address economic justice. The distribution of property, and especially land today, is unequal as it ever was. Today, South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world. South Africa's settler colonialism was based on exploitation of cheap labor, and majority rule does not itself erode the legacy of economic inequality. So, to conclude, in the 1980s and early 1990s, the South African liberation movement captured the imagination of a worldwide struggle of the colonized. Today, it is the struggle of the Palestinians that represents and concentrates the wider struggles of the colonized against empire. It is no accident that it was South Africa that brought the charge of genocide against Israel to the International Court of Justice, passing the baton of resistance to the Palestinians. In their struggle for survival, at an unimaginable cost, the Palestinians may not only save themselves, but in the process save Israel from its suicidal mission, and simultaneously inspire others to struggle against decaying empires. In an era of post-coloniality, settler colonialism sticks out as an anachronism. As sociologists, we know force is never enough to preserve an order. As W.B. Du Bois was fond of saying in connection with U.S. slavery, the heavy price of liberation is less than the cost of continued repression. Thank you. I'm sorry I went on too long.
A little bit, but we will try.
Not too much long, actually.
We'll try to make it a little bit shorter.
Tá bem, ok. Depois dizes-me se quando eu estiver muito... 10 minutos. Não, acho que não sei, acho que não. 30. Mas diz-me quando eu tiver que cortar, ok?
Thank you very much for this inspiring speech, and I'm sure a lot of people will approach you to discuss some of these ideas. We will go now for the speech of Anália Torres. From turbulent to dangerous times, gender issues on the battlefield. Anália, whenever you want.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. Ligia, the Lock, Porto, that I liked very much. thank you so much for being here and for this fabulous organizational challenge that you've been through, and you are just to congratulate until now for what you achieved as a collective, of course. Thank you so much, Michael. I'm very honored to be on the floor with you. It's an honor, it's a pleasure. As you mentioned, we met 20 years ago. And I was when I met you, it was the period where you have published the paper on public sociology, and I was very enthusiastic about public sociology. It was really magical to meet you. And of course, then I invited you to come to Portugal, and then you came to Lisbon, and then you gave not only one conference, 2 conferences, and as you know, everybody that knows Michael, he's very enthusiastic on this work, so he literally wanted to know Portugal. Then he went to Coimbra, and then he did not interview people in Coimbra, so decided to go to Porto, and they interviewed a lot of people in Porto, and colleagues, of course. And then he was enthusiastic about Portuguese sociology, and then he wrote a very interesting text saying, of course, we were very thankful to you that not only Portugal was the poster child of public sociology, you remember that? As you said, also it was one of the most vibrant sociologies in Europe. So, of course, from then on, we are very grateful to you for your propaganda concerning Portuguese sociology. So now, let's stick to the point. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about from turbulent to dangerous times, talking about also it's the core of the talk. After decades of progress concerning gender equality, women's and LGBTQ rights, plus rights, gender issues are under attack, so it's a fact. I will try to identify some landmarks of both progress and attacks on gender equality, some examples, transnational and national, and I will address gender and gender studies as a field of knowledge and research, and I conclude my remarks. I was asked to do a little bit shortened, but let's see how it goes. So times we live in gone from turbulent to dangerous, with war in Europe and in many parts of the world. Since the economic crisis of 2008, the government have saved the banks, and governments have saved the banks and financial capital to prevent the immediate collapse that occurred in 29 crisis, so 100 years ago. However, the collapse has been occurring slowly since then in this neoliberal capitalism, which has taken on the contours of savage capitalism if you consider the devastating effects on the planet. The banks have been saved at the cost of continuing and deepening cuts and disinvestment in public systems, shortened even more redistribution policies to the most disadvantaged, and also affecting the middle classes and resulting in a brutal deepening of inequalities. So the discontent and economic difficulties of many are taken advantage of by populist political sectors that spread fear and stir up ghosts, using repressive speeches and lies, attacking gender equality, LGBTQ+ rights, and engaging with openly racist and xenophobic speeches. When I was preparing my talk, I encountered this website from Grandmothers for Reproductive Rights that states a very interesting thing, which is that our granddaughters should not have to fight the battles that their grandmothers already won. Of course, this is referring to the question of abortion in the United States, and this is a very active group that shows the questions they show on the website a lot of resources, information resources concerning this question about abortion in the United States. So I think I belong to this generation of grandmothers. In '79, in Portugal, a group of activists and people linked to left-wing parties created what we called then the National Campaign for Abortion and Contraception, CNAC. I was a member of CNAC's board. From then on, and after years of fight, finally in 2007, with the referendum, abortion was permitted by women's demand in Portugal. So you see, this is a kind of battle that comes from long. Portugal has arrived to sociology only late to sociology, only allowed as graduation course after 74, and to the institutionalization of gender studies. But in 2012, the first research center completely dedicated to gender studies, CIEG, was launched in the University of Lisbon. So just to identify some landmarks of both progress in the attacks on gender equality. First, attacks on gender equality are not new. We know the backlash of the 80s, that's the consequences of the advances made by the feminist movement in the 70s. There were a lot of contesting feminist victories, like Roe versus Wade and like the Equality Rights Amendment. Conservative women and men began to build a counter-narrative based on so-called traditional American values. So Phyllis Schlafly, anti-feminist group, she directed an anti-feminist group called the Eagle Forum. Attacks also from religious forces, the Vatican and other religious groups against women's reproductive rights since the 70s. And in political context, by that time it was Thatcher's and Reagan era, conservative wave, deregulation of financial markets and system that had its outcome in 2008. So in the 70s, you have here the demonstration. It was a women's coalition strike. It's a demonstration in New York in 1917, 50 years after the right to vote for women to vote in the USA. And you have also at the right side the anti-feminist demonstration of 1977, and this Phyllis Schlafly was wearing a stop area in front of the White House. And it's really a very active group for all the period of the 70s on, just always against era, always against feminist movement, and always talking about the values, traditional values for America. So this comes from long. At the same time, in the United Nations, there were several conferences of the United Nations, one of the population and development. We could assist also an alliance between the Vatican, Iran, and Saudi Arabia against reproductive women's rights and women's self-determination. So, because these was themes that appeared in that conferences. But in Beijing's declaration, 1995, that it was approved in the World Conference on Women, it appears the word gender. And I'm going to read because this is really important, a declaration that was important. It is, it's a declaration of this Beijing declaration. It's a commitment. We hereby adopt and commit ourselves as governments to implement the following platform for action, ensuring that a gender perspective is reflected in all our policies and programs. So, UN Declaration on Gender Equality, we know that this declaration of Peking was renewed all 5 years, and the last, it was 2020. So it's a strong thing saying that gender perspective should be adopted, and we have resources of a gender perspective. And the word gender created from then on, from 1995, a ground of battle between conservative and progressive forces. So that's when it enters the arguments, and it appears the word, and then from then on, gender was considered a land of battle. So in the last decades, attacks against gender equality were intensified for different reasons. The deepening of inequalities and the degradation of living conditions of millions gave fuel to the rise of extreme right, which besides issues related to immigration and security, also targets what they call gender ideology as a main societal enemy. There's also a strong alliance of far right with religious forces and conservative parties that lost some battles. Abortion and same-sex marriage, I should say they were losers, but since Trump is using the word, we don't like to use it so, but it's really that idea that there are conservative forces that lost power because the other side, of course, has advanced. So, and that have always been against gender equality and have now the opportunity to return to their old political agenda. So that's One of the things is this alliance between far right and the conservatives that had lost power. So how do movements against gender equality proceed? Constitutions of strong international networks with the rhetoric and the arguments that circulate internationally, distorting gender equality agenda and creating moral panic and fear, namely using children. They have some plasticity in adopting specific arguments in different countries. Demonstrations on the street help encourage public pressure over policymakers. This is important because even if some policymakers are eager to change things, then if they are threatened with demonstrations on the street against, they will not change things, who then fear to pass progressive laws that will be contested. That happened a lot in France. There were a lot of demonstrations on the street against same-sex marriage, for instance. In Italy, the same, and of course also in Spain. And of course, the election of populist and authoritarian leaders have reinforced the trend of attacks and revision of laws in the countries where they were or they are in power. Orban, 2010, Trump, 2016, Bolsonaro, 2018, and then Meloni still now. So how do, continuing with the idea, how do they proceed? Religious leaders give far rights the narrative and they do the dirty work, or they construct the narrative by themselves. They are violent. In Portugal, for example, they interrupt violently books launching for children approaching LGBT topics. In Brazil, a program for training teachers for the prevention of homophobia and transphobia, because some parents expel homosexuals and trans sons and daughters from their homes, was used to create moral panic, claiming that the intention was to sexualize children. Moral panic instills fear also among teachers that do not know how to address those topics and prefer not to talk about them, even if they are mentioned in handbooks. For the Vatican, the stronger argument against what they call gender ideology is that it goes against the natural order of things. Sexual norms are ahistorical and apolitical. Catholic transnational discourse deploying as an anthropological and scientific point of view on what is human in alliance with other religious trends. I'm quoting several colleagues, so I can not say all names, but anyway, it's based on it, it's written here. So there is a battle over resources, and I stress this is very important because usually it's called, this is a cultural law. It's also a cultural law, but it's a cultural over resources where state government money should be applied, and also a cultural law over who has the power of the narrative. So it's both. Besides, we are dealing with the change in relationships and change in gender relations, and some forces do not want change. Questioning existing power relationship concerning gender, but not only concerning also social equality, race, sexual diversity. I mean, these people hate equality. Two examples show how strong feminist movement and gender studies impacted and changed policies promoting gender equality in Brazil, and how they were contested, and how also. I'm going to talk very quickly about what happened in Brazil and Uganda that can give some insights. So Carla Bessa, in the text summing up the growth and strengths of women's feminist and gender studies, which was very strong in the 70s, in the 80s, and in the 90s, Carla shows how in Brazil, how research made on those years impacted the changes in public policies, especially after 2003, that was when Lula was elected. So there were a lot of changes in the relation between state and citizens, promotion of policies combating violence against women, discrimination and pro-civil rights, same-sex marriage all along this last decade, especially after 2000, called marches, big demonstrations, where it was very curious, sometimes an alliance between just land reclamations and the indigenous stories with LGBT issues. So it was a mingle of those things. It's very interesting to know this story. Anyway, and it was violently, for instance, there's a marcher called Margaridas. It was a leader from the agriculture, from a trade union, and she was killed because then it goes violent, really, really violent. And she was killed by the landowners. They didn't want, because she was organizing salaries raised and all those kind of stuff. So it's very interesting. And then it's from then on, it was all from 20 years or 300 years. There's marches where everybody, women go to the streets reclaiming for that kind of against this kind of repression. So legal contracts do not change practices, of course, and are limited. Abortion is not allowed in Brazil, but send a signal of change to conservative groups that attacked with all these weapons. And finally, Bolsonaro was elected, as we know, in 2018. So those attacks were common in Latin America and were supported by an alliance between the Catholic Church and New Evangelics, and they had in common. They all happened after the turn of the century. They appeared in countries where the left-wing parties were in power, and they developed around the legal and educational reforms. So in Uganda, this is another example in the completely different context, but it's interesting to see also that in Uganda there was a strong women and gender studies academic unit, and there was a strong, say, feminist movement also. And it was institutionalized at Makerere University, developing several courses, and they were very active in training and research and all along these decades. They consider themselves part of the global feminist movement against patriarchal oppression in all its manifestations. What I was just drawing your attention here for a very interesting thing, which is a very hot topic within feminism, sometimes concerning decolonial. So what they say we assert our space as African feminists. We also draw inspiration from our feminist ancestors who blazed the trail and made it possible to affirm the rights of African women. As we involve the memory of those women whose names are hardly ever recorded in any history books, we insist that it is a profound insult to claim that feminism was imported into Africa from the West. Because this is always the thing, the accusation when they don't want, of course, to rent gender issues. They say it's imported from the West. That happens also in Russia, that happens also in Eastern countries, and so on. So we claim and assert a long and rich tradition of African women's resistance to patriarchy in Africa. So in Europe, going very short. Well, what's happening in Europe? Because today almost countries allow abortion on request on broad social grounds. And only a few countries, but even in Catholic countries like Spain and Portugal, the trend has been of changing laws pro-gender equality, but in both countries also far-right parties have growing and challenging, are growing and they challenge those changes, and of course in Italy also. But of course 14 member states currently allow same-sex marriage, and we have a lot of strategies strategies against pro-gender equality, and the European Union is always talking about those issues now for some decades. But in Eastern Europe, profound attacks on gender equality and on gender studies. In Hungary, in 2018, the government officially removed gender studies masters and PhD degrees from the list of accredited subjects in the country. And in Poland, we know the strong demonstrations against the limitation of abortion rights. And as Andrea Petto states, a great scholar, from the emergencies of anti-gender movements as a reaction to the 2008 triple crisis, financial, security, and migration, dramatically changed the framework which gender studies has been operating in Eastern Europe. And anti-gender movements are populist conservative movements that, in response to the crisis of the neoliberal world order, use the concept of gender to mobilize not only against gender studies, but against LGBT rights, the Istanbul Convention, sex education in schools, and international organizations such as the UN, the European Union and UN and the WHO. So in the USA, of course, just talking very quickly about That's what gave origin to the grandmothers and grandmothers fights. Of course, a lot of important setbacks. This data came from that website I'll talk to you about. Since the overturning of Roe and Wade, the 14 states now have no clinics providing abortion care at all. National anti-abortion centers outnumber abortion clinics by an average of 3 and 2 to 1. I was surprised with this information. I didn't know. And anti-abortion centers also receive state funding in at least 29 states. 41 states have abortion bans, 14 have total ban, and 27 have abortion bans based on periods. So, but same-sex marriage in all states are all for all states now since 2015. So, we came a long way since sociologist Anne Oakley in 1972 proposed the concept of gender, distinguishing it from biological sex, allowing the role of culture on the definition of what biological bodies can or cannot do, questioning the natural order of things precisely because that natural order is unequal and hierarchical and excludes all those who do not fit into a determined pattern. From then on, many other feminist sociologists contributed deeply to the field of research on gender studies, proposing theoretical frameworks and developing empirical research. Sylvia Welby, our first president here, Claire Wallace, Sue Scott, also our presidents, and of course Rain Connell and many others. It's very difficult to talk about names because there's the collective, this is a collective endeavor as is also sociology. The concept of gender can be today defined with different theoretical strands, from structuralist to post-structuralist to interactionist to osynous performative, or with a queer approach, refusing the binary order. Beyond diversity, research on gender and sexuality has given visibility to realities that were less known, where we were talking about whether we are talking about the relation between reproductive and productive sphere, and how it helps explaining the gender pay gap, whether we are talking about masculinities and how they shape power relations, or analyzing how old LGBT citizens were persecuted and lived in fear in countries where it was, and in some it still is, considered a crime, or research on sexual harassment and bullying. And these types of research also have contributed to change gender relations, since many of those research results were crucial for changes in policies and laws in many countries. So different examples of advances and retrieves around gender equality show complex phenomena in which different structural, cultural, symbolic, and emotional dimensions are at play, as Connell has been showing us. We need to better understand what leads some people to adhere to radical positions, and how can we contribute for the recognition of the problems experienced by minorities to people who live lives hardly intersects with theirs, and how emotions get into the picture, as Ray and Connell, also Arlie Hochschild and Michel Lamont have been writing. And sometimes it could not be so difficult. Michel Lamont referred some time ago to a simple survey data showing that juvenile suicide fell down dramatically in the USA after the approval of same-sex marriage. That might help to show the suffering and the need for recognition, and that trans rights or self-determination take no else's rights away. They are a form of freedom that has been achieved through struggle. So that is why we need to base our positions on research, also taking into account different audiences, including the general public. It is true that this type of reasoned arguments do not intend to convince the far right and its supporters, just as there is no hope of convincing Ventura, Donald Trump, or Bolsonaro, supporters with rational arguments. This type of argument is important for the media, for journalists and policymakers, for people who genuinely do not know what is being discussed and will have the opportunity to find out more about gender research. It is essential to counter lies and misinformation with knowledge, as the former are the preferred weapons of demagogues. But it is necessary to denounce these lies in a systematic, serious and educational way, using more data than emotions. So I'm finishing. Gender equality is a long-term project. Our granddaughters should not have to fight the battles their grandmothers already won. In case of need, grandmothers are still here to join the fight.
Thank you very much, Anália. So I declare that this plenary is closed right now. As I explained, we have no time today for the questions and answers here, but we will continue outside with the welcome cocktail, the sociological speed dating, and the celebrations of the ESA's 30th anniversary. Thank you very much.